Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Abbey Research Reads. I am Dr. Donnelly, and I'm here today talking about a book by Erica Garza named Getting Off, which is about her. The subtitle is A Journey into a Woman's Addiction, Sex Addiction and Porn, and all of that. And really, I mean, it's a titillating title, obviously, for good reason, but that's what it is. Erica is incredibly vulnerable in this book. She talks about how she first discovered bodies and masturbation and orgasms even before she got her period, how that complicated things for her, how she was essentially spending all of her time, free time possible, either masturbating or enjoying porn or both at the same time. She talks about the shame that was involved in that process. She talks about crunching herself into a closet so that no one would ever find her, convinced that everybody would know what was happening. She talks about the times that she confessed the fact that she watched as much porn as she did to partners, and how that didn't go well for her. She talked about not understanding how to communicate her particular tastes and kinks and preferences in ways that it wouldn't come across as shameful. She talks about how for so long her relationships were entirely transactional, that she was terrified of commitment or emotional vulnerability, that she couldn't function. And instead of having difficult conversations or working it out with somebody, she simply ran. She ran from relationship to relationship. From a sexual health perspective, she put herself in incredible danger, a whole lot. Statistically, the larger number of partners that we have, that and however large their partner count is, puts us more and more in physical danger, especially if you don't use any level of protection, the way that Erica is clear that she often didn't. And all along, you get the impression in this very kind of bare bones, this is how I was feeling, this is what I was doing, this is where I was going, that she's still wrestling with the emotions of this time. That yes, she's come out potentially the other side. She has a much more balanced relationship with her body and with sex now than she had at different times in her existence. But this isn't something that she's over. In a certain way, it's the perfect example for all kinds of addiction. Anyone who is classified as clinically addicted to something never gets over it. They're never fully done. It's a part of their DNA for the rest of their lives. And it's a lot about balance. Now, there are some addictions that can't be about balance. Addiction to Coke, for instance. Coke doesn't really allow you to be balanced. Alcoholism doesn't really allow you to be balanced. Disordered eating is a lot more about finding balance again. So there's, which is classified by some people as an addiction. Sorry, let me fill that in my brain, an addiction to control. But because you can't see inside my brain, which you all should be incredibly thankful for, because it is a troubling place. But what I appreciated about this is the perpetual nature of her confession in a certain way. Every time she hit something else she was ashamed of, we were there with her and we went with her. It's a quick read. Especially if you're like me and a lot of this is just academically fascinating and not necessarily emotionally connective tissue. If you've listened to our other reviews or you've seen other videos on our channel, Dr. Erin and I talk a lot about how she has a lot of emotionally reactive empathy. And I have a lot of pragmatically reactive empathy. And that's just how our bodies are wired, and our life experiences are quite different. And this is a book in which I'm sure that there are some people that would find a lot of pain in this story, that would find it a tough sit. And my reaction entirely was, I'm so glad she's writing some of these things in past tense. And I'm really curious as to how she got to where it was past tense. Sex addiction is real. We often make fun of it. I remember when David Duchovny came out a couple years ago as a sex addict, everybody made fun of it. Like, how can you be addicted to sex? How can you possibly have too much sex? And it was very mockable. The thing with sex addiction is that's incredibly real. And a lot of it is about disconnection from the rest of a relationship. So if you're completely addicted to sex and you can't really do anything without allowing your body to have that physiological reaction that comes from sexual release and or orgasm, it really precludes the availability of an emotional connection or an emotional relationship. So sex addicts talk a lot about chasing a high in a certain way, in the same way that, like, perhaps And Erica's very clear about this. The porn that she watched when she first started, which some people would consider very kind of run-of-the-mill, vanilla, mainstream, no longer could get her off within a couple years. And she had to keep getting more and more violent in a certain way. She had to go more and more towards gangbangs and a lot of things that are on the more hardcore end of the pornographic filming spectrum. Additionally, just as a point of interest to me, she's a millennial, just like I am. And so her access to the internet, evolves through this time as well. And she talks about that, about the availability of porn and what, like downloading AOL was like, and chat rooms and sexting personas and acting like a different person and things. A lot of the ways that people in my generation did experiment with themselves and with ideas of sex. And they were very comfortable talking about sex and using sexual terms and crass sexual terms long before they were ever ready for physical activity. And Erica's clear about that. She had been posing as a 22-year-old grad student and sexting with 45-year-old men in Iowa for years before she actually had sex for the first time, which was not like something she was even particularly ready for. I say all of this because I think, obviously, first of all, you've clicked on the video because you want to hear my review, but also because it's an incredible empathy read. I don't think we come across many people in our lives that are willing to talk about their sexual proclivities or sexual addictions in a certain way. There's an incredible amount of shame that surrounds this. There's an incredible amount of social shame that we've piled on that sex is not something that we talk about. I am personally of the belief that if we could become more comfortable talking about sex, a lot of people would have healthier sex lives and healthier relationships with their bodies. And so I am never shy to talk about sex or ask questions or have the hard conversations because, as you can tell from this channel potentially and from knowing us at all, Dr. Aaron and I never shy away from hard conversations if it's going to bring us any level of clarity on the other side, more empathy, and a more inclusive society. It's a quick read. Like I said, it could be hard. I'm not a great judge of it. I was fascinated by it and just incredibly impressed with Miss Garza's vulnerability and transparency as she went through her journey. I recommend it for sure. If you are not comfortable with reading about sexual terms, this might not be the book for you. There might be a couple baby steps first. I really compare this a lot with the book Cam Girl that I don't believe I reviewed, but was about a girl who ran her own private cam channel for a long time and kind of the process of losing and finding herself as part of that. I am always interested in how women assert and use power, both of their bodies and their minds. And this was a lot of this. But ultimately, the lesson of this book and the lesson of Erica's life is that if you do consistently remove sexual activity from intimate relationships, it can become incredibly damaging. This is not necessarily a secret. It sounds maybe kind of prudish. And there's a lot of, especially people in their 20s that are like, no, I need to completely sleep around. And I don't need any emotional connection. And maybe for a while you don't, but at some point, every human kind of does. We have a lot of research that says that having exclusive interactions with pornographic material rather than personal interactions with sexual activity, if it tips entirely on the pornographic images and pornographic side, the ability to connect emotionally, vulnerably, and sexually with another person is damaged slightly. And it takes some more work to get to the point where someone might want to be. This is a messy topic. Erica's story is one that is messy. She slips, she relapses, she struggles. And yes, the end of the book is on a optimistic note. But the book was in 2017, 2018, I believe, 18. And I'd be desperately curious how she's doing now, because I have a feeling that a lot of her life is in flux, that she is continually learning the lessons that she learned at her various therapeutic institutions, and that she is continually putting those things into practice. So like I said, great empathy read, especially if sex is not something you're particularly comfortable talking about. It is graphic for sure. So if this is a topic that you want to have more empathy about, but don't really know a whole lot about, I'm not sure I'd start with this or Cam Girl. And I'm not entirely sure where I'd start, because to be completely honest, I taught sex ed for a year. I'm really comfortable saying the word vagina. And I don't have a lot of memory of times where I was uncomfortable with that, just because of my life experience. So I'm not maybe a great guide. But if you're like me and you're comfortable with the language and you're comfortable with the crassness and you just want to know more about people for whom this is their life lens, Getting Off is a great, great way to get that. That's all for this edition of Abbey Research Reads. I'm Dr. Kristen, and I'll see you next time. Bye.